All right, welcome back to the program. Still to come, what does it mean if you wear a $160 pair of sneakers and go for a walk in the wrong neighborhood in Madison? Correct, Mr. Sperry. All right, but before we get into that, that's, of course, one of the great stories that Madison just doesn't want to talk about. We whisper about it, but we don't want to talk about it. I got to say hi to Eric Hovde. Eric, who just had a big press conference today to roll out an 8-point plan. You heard Eric on the program before. He's running for U.S. Senate, and he joins me on the phone right now. Hello, Eric Hovde.
Hi, Vicki. It's great being on the show today.
It is great having you back. All right, Eric. So, folks have said, okay, I like the guy. He sounds pretty good. What's his plan? Does he have a plan? Well, if you want to read the plan, you can now download and read the plan. And it is 8 points, all fiscally oriented points that try to get us to a place where there's common sense in government. Can we start where I want to start, or do you want to pick one?
You go ahead, start where you want. Ladies first.
I want to start with cronyism and regulation. That's where I want to start.
Fantastic. That's the 8 points in my 8-point plan. One of the things we got to strip out at its very core is cronyism. What is cronyism? It's where the well-connected, the people that can buy off the system, be it the big public unions or the big giant corporations, distort our system. And they distort our free market capitalist system and our democracy. How do they attack us? One, through the tax system. I've talked about taxes, how you got certain companies like GE or Goldman Sachs that our years will pay nothing in tax, but our small businesses are paying, the highest corporate tax rate in the world at 35%. They attack it through rulemakings. How about earmarks, where they give career politicians money to get direct appropriations for some project? Or government contracts. Boeing has, the tanker deal, what cost-plus contract, never delivered the tankers in time. It's gone on and on and on, and the cost is quadrupled on the American taxpayer. Or how about loan guarantees? Everybody remembers Solyndra. President Obama's big campaign contributor, George Kaiser, gave him a big check. President Obama gets into office, signs off on a $500 million loan guarantee to Solyndra. Solyndra goes bankrupt. 1,000 people lose their jobs. American taxpayer, our money gets gone down the tube, $500 million. President Obama still has his campaign check. So cronyism is distorting our free market system, and it's a byproduct of big government. It's always been part of Europe, and now it has crept into us because all these special interests are trying to leech off this giant government we've created.
It is a byproduct of big government. And what you've got are very, very big leeches. And the folks who end up getting hammered, little people like me, smaller companies who don't have the ability to lobby, who don't have that kind of competitive place in the marketplace. And when I say marketplace, I mean the lobbying marketplace. They don't have $1 million to spend a year to lobby or more. That is one of the things that we have seen confused with free market capitalism. These are different things. Cronyism is not about the free market. It's about distorting the market. How do you end it, though?
You've got to attack it at its very roots. One, you got, my number 2 is reforming our tax system. Let's just take a look at that. As I said, we got the highest corporate tax rate at 35%. But you have companies like GE that have 1,000 people in their tax department that certain years pay 0 in taxes. You got to put a bright spotlight on all these tax loopholes, get rid of them, and lower the corporate rate. When it comes to loan guarantees, again, we should not have presidents or politicians signing off on loan guarantees where somebody's giving them a big contribution. We should just ban that altogether. Earmarks, there is no reason why there should be earmarks. Fortunately, it's been very restricted since 2010, but frankly, they should ban earmarks altogether. Rulemaking, again, you got to put a bright spotlight on this and call it out. We have a whole culture of corruption in Washington, D.C., and with career politicians, which, frankly, our founding fathers warned us against. They wanted us to be governed by citizen legislators, and I think that's one of the problems that we've had. We've developed a political class, and it's all about, how can they raise campaign contributions to fund their next reelection.
I think about back on the minimum wage, the federal minimum wage debate back in the mid-2000s. You had the big business lobby groups like U.S. Chamber squaring off against the Independent Business Federation. You had big companies like Walmart squaring off against little mom and pop shops. Big organizations said, fine, raise the minimum wage. We're for that. Little guys were saying, you're going to kill us. You've just artificially increased the cost of our labor. We're going to have to lay people off, or we're going to have to take the hit in terms of profit. Those are the kinds of things that's sort of minor level stuff. That's not big stuff like getting a $500 million loan guarantee because you made a campaign contribution.
Yeah, and even think of all the excessive regulations. My point number 3. We have 81,000 pages of regulations by the federal government. It's estimated to cost American business $1.5 trillion plus to our private sector economy. If you're a big giant company, it's a cost of doing business. They'll pass it on to their consumers. They can have fleets of attorneys. If you're a small business, it is so restrictive. It's crippling. In fact, Gallup just polled small business and asked them what are their biggest obstacles. 46% of them said the excessive regulations is preventing them from hiring new employees. Well, it's small business that creates jobs. We know that. Big business fires as many people as they do hire every year. It's small and medium-sized business in their growth stage. And so we're stifling them with excessive amounts of regulation. All these are byproducts of massively increasing government, and we've had a government that has just grown wildly out of control. At
their growth stage, that's key, because we want small businesses to become medium businesses. We want medium businesses to grow to become large businesses. That way you actually have more and more people able to walk up the income ladder. But we're hitting those small guys at a point where they need to start, getting off that launch pad. Right when they're ready to do that, we say, no, let's throw a wet blanket over you guys and make it, one, uncertain, and two, very, very costly for you to expand. I think about this is my favorite regulation that I've ever heard, and it was passed just recently. The Center for Consumer Protection decided that they wanted to protect little children from lead paint, and so they decided to go after secondhand retailers who might sell products that might contain lead, forcing secondhand stores to test every product made before 1986 for lead. People saying, you know what, never mind, too much hassle, I'm shutting my doors, I'm laying off my 6 workers, we won't even bother with this any longer.
Yeah.
Dumb.
It's just beyond dumb. And again, you just have small and medium-sized business are getting hit by the tax code, by excessive regulation, by cronyism. This is not free markets. We have to get back to a free market system that's fair, that is based on meritocracy, self-achievement through hard work. That's what we need to get back to, not who can get access to the tax code or regulations because they have money to buy off career politicians.
Yeah. And I think of environmental regulations, and you see some of these larger companies, they're not fighting back against them. In the meantime, little restaurants who want to just repave their driveways in Economo Walk end up having to close down because they can't comply with the environmental regulations. And the list goes on and on. So cronyism, environmental regulations, you mentioned tax code. I'm not just environmental regulations, all regulations. You mentioned the tax code. This thing's enormous. If you stacked it paper on top of paper, it actually, I'm told, stacks to the size of the top of the U.S. Capitol.
Our tax system is a joke. We spend anywhere from $160 to $300 billion a year in just preparing our taxes. Most people should be able to have their taxes filed on a postcard or on a couple pages. As I've talked about, we have the highest corporate tax rate in the world. I mean, if you want to think of it, put yourself in the place of a business person that is thinking of making a $10 million investment in a plant that's going to hire, 100 employees. Are you going to put that in the United States where you're being taxed at 35%? Or go up to Canada where Harper, the president there, is moving the tax rate down below 20%? Why not put it in Canada and just ship your goods back if you're going to be taxed at, 60% of what America's tax system is? We've got to make our tax system more competitive, get rid of all the corporate welfare that's baked into it, fair it up, and lower the tax burden on business to help, get the job engine going in this country again.
All right. So the tax code and individuals, by the way, have a huge difficulty complying with the tax code. I always love to tell people, have some fun with yourself. Call the IRS and ask a question. Wait 10 minutes, call back. You'll get a different person. Ask the same question. See if you get the same answer. And the reason I know you can do this and not get the same answer is because I've done it more than once. So we've got people who manage our tax code who don't even know because it's so enormous and it's so complicated. I gave up and I started paying someone to do my taxes. I don't even have that complicated of a tax return. I gave up. I just want to pay someone. Just please, I don't want to be in trouble with the federal government anymore. So we have an insane kind of mess. But look, a lot of people like their deductions, Eric.
I realize that, but you know what? What would they rather have? Their specialized deductions or lower rates in getting rid of a lot of the deductions? There are some deductions, like the charitable deduction, I wouldn't touch because we know charities do a vastly better job of caring for people that are struggling than government ever does. I wouldn't mess with the mortgage deduction right now because our housing market is broken. But we have so many deductions, and so much of it is cronyism bought off by certain corporate interests. And that's been the big dirty secret in Washington. We haven't had true tax reform since President Reagan because largely giant business kills it. So we've got to reform our tax system. And on the individual level, why have 6 different brackets? How about 2? How about going to 10 and 25%? I mean, these are just common sense approaches. And we've got to get on with it.
It works for me. And that mortgage interest rate deduction that you have, by the way, that's distorting the market as well. That deduction you're getting is getting baked into the cost of your purchasing your home. So, I mean, that's you just don't see it. You're paying more for the house because they know that you're going to get to deduct the interest rates or the interest on the loan for a little while. That's getting baked in. Get rid of it entirely. Maybe you want to rip that Band-Aid off slow. Maybe you want to rip it off fast. But in the end, it is not something that's necessarily helping middle-class homeowners. It hasn't been around forever. My parents bought a house. Eric, yours probably did too. My dad was working a line job at Sunstrand Corporation in Rockford, Illinois. He didn't have a mortgage interest rate deduction to take when he bought his house. No. So many of the tax loopholes have just been built up over the years by, again, special interest groups that lobby for this or lobby for that and twist the tax code. That's the number one way. And why do career politicians want it? Because that's how they get their campaign contributions. I think that's – what was it? You actually told me this earlier. What is the cost of compliance with the U.S. tax code?
I'm forgetting the number right now, but put it this way, for tax preparation per year, it's estimated anywhere from $160 to $300 billion a year. Look, I'm considered a financial expert. I need help having, my taxes prepared. I don't understand half of it. So the tax code has just become such an economic weight year in and year out on our whole economy.
Imagine if somebody just said, we're going to raise your taxes by $160 or $300 billion a year. Or we're going to cut your taxes by $160 or $300 billion a year. You'd either be really angry, you'd be really happy. But that's what we're taking out of the private economy, and that's just for tax preparation. That isn't for me trying to hide my money, which I don't do because I don't have enough to do it. That's not for me trying to find places to duck my money and the different kinds of compliance costs built in for those purposes. That's just preparing my taxes for April 15th. That's nuts.
Oh, it's totally nuts. But, Vicki, as I say, this 8-point plan that I have, so much of it's just common sense. Take energy. We've been hearing career politicians talk about energy independence for 40 years. And yet last year, our trade deficit was $555 billion. 60% of that was tied to the importation of oil. So $392 billion came out of Americans' back pocketbooks and were transferred to largely Middle Eastern countries. Many of them are adversaries. And yet we sit here with 270 trillion cubic square feet of natural gas, enough to power our whole economy for 100 years. We have $1.5 trillion barrels of oil, that through oil shale. Why aren't we drilling on private lands and, freeing up private landowners to be able to drill? And why aren't we drilling on public lands? This is just basic common sense. North Dakota has a 3% unemployment rate, the most booming economy. Why? Because they're fracking for natural gas.
Eric, they're taking a vote today to eliminate their property tax, too, in North Dakota. Yeah. I'm cheering them on, man. Where can people find out more? EricForSenate.com. EricForSenate.com, and that's Eric with a C. EricForSenate.com. Eric Hovde, thank you very much. Vicki, you're the best, and I hope everybody has a wonderful night. And last week, we had a great victory, and the state of Wisconsin's moving in the right direction. All right, appreciate. Let's just get the federal government moving in that direction, too. How about we just copy Scott Walker's plan for the federal government? We're good to go. Come on. Why reinvent the wheel? Thanks, Eric. A pleasure. EricForSenate.com. We got to take a quick break.